Well, hello, good evening, and welcome to episode 107 of Fracking Nightmare, being broadcast on the 4th of May 2017. Now, this is a pretty significant date because the well site that Quadrilla are in the process of constructing at Preston New Road in Lancashire is now taking exactly twice as long as Quadrilla claimed that it would take in their planning permission. And it's still quite some way from being completed as we speak. So that's a remarkable delay, and consequently I'm delighted to welcome tonight Bob Dennett from Lancashire, from Frack Free Lancashire, to join us. And Bob's going to be with me for the whole hour, and we're going to be having a discussion about all things fracking related in the UK. So good evening, Bob, and thanks for joining me at relatively short notice.
Good evening, Ian. Thanks very much for asking me to come on.
And I can see that you're in a solid residence there, but I know you've been spending quite some time at the New Hope camp in just off Preston New Road.
Yes, I have. It's not the best place in the world to get a full night's sleep, but yeah, it's a nice place, very welcoming, and it's coming up. It's coming on nicely.
So, Bob, you must be really quite pleased that Quadrilla have taken, well, it's A. Yates, of course, that have the contract for the construction of the pad. But it must be quite satisfying, although not completely satisfying, because obviously it would be completely satisfying if they packed up and gone home. But it must be quite satisfying that they are so far behind schedule.
Yeah. When it was posted in the Bolton Evening News that the contract had been awarded to A. Yates, it said it was a 17-week contract. Well, that finishes today. The 17 weeks is up today. I don't really believe that it's going to take another 17 weeks, but they're certainly well behind schedule from the pictures we've seen of the site itself.
Well, Quadrilla have announced that I think I saw a statement that said that they were anticipating bringing in the workover rig sometime during May. So, and I know that last week they laid the membrane on the actual pad. So, they're certainly getting towards completion. But I'm sure that A. Yates' contract actually goes beyond simply handing over the site. So I don't know how far.
Course, yeah.
I don't know how far they are actually behind, but they are a long way behind. So. Obviously, there's been a lot of activity at Preston New Road, and we have focused on that. And we're going to come back to the activity at Preston New Road, but there's a lot of other stuff going on right now. And, the south of England is often overlooked. And, there's a perception that the south of England has actually escaped the unconventional gas industry. But, of course, that isn't strictly true. And what we see on screen there is the licensed areas that have been granted in the south of England and across into South Wales. Now, it's nothing like the spread, of course, across the north of England, which is, as we'll see later, the entire north of England, with the exception of the High Pennines. But the area that is most under attack is around here. This is the Weald. Oh, let's go back one. That's the Weald. This is the area between the North and the South Downs. So from approximately 20 miles south of London to about 40 miles south of London. And this beautiful area between the North and the South Downs is just like the Vale of Pickering in North Yorkshire. Beautiful, much more heavily wooded perhaps than the Vale of Pickering. But nonetheless is potentially open for unconventional gas extraction. And there was a bit of a result this week where UCOG, the company that had been drilling at Horse Hill, that up until 2 years ago was under the leadership of dodgy David Lenigas, but a couple of days ago they announced that they were withdrawing from their Markswell's Wood application in West Sussex. And what was interesting was that it seemed that the anti-fracking community got wind of that announcement before David Lenigas was aware. Did you catch that, Bob?
Yes, I did.
And he wasn't best pleased.
No, I bet he wasn't.
I mean, he's still got a bit of skin in the game, and even though he's no longer on the board, but he was certainly pretty frustrated that the anti-fracking community were publicising that the application had been withdrawn before he was aware of it. And so there you go. If you want to find out what's going on, then tune in to Fracking Nightmare or read Drill or Drop. Ruth Hayhurst's excellent digest on all things related to onshore gas exploitation in the UK. Now, there's another area in the south of England that is also being targeted, and this is really close to London, and this is Leith Hill. And this is my old stomping ground because it's just a few miles south of where I grew up in Epsom, and the beautiful area around Leith Hill, Ranmore Common, right the way across to Newlands Corner and Guildford, used to be my old stomping ground. But of course, this is a site that was rejected by Surrey County Council, and then just like in Lancashire, was overturned by central government. And there was a camp there, and a lot of support for the camp, primarily because this ancient woodland is just absurd that to think that these sunken lanes can take the heavy goods vehicles and the infrastructure associated with the unconventional gas industry. But the camp now consists of this, a fortress, an absolute pallet fortress, because the company, Europa, I believe it is, Europa have managed to get an eviction order on the camp. It's an eviction that hasn't yet been carried out, and I think it might be a little messy if they do try and carry out an eviction. But what was interesting about this one, Bob, was that the judge actually put a contempt order on the court ruling, stating that any local people who supported the camp would be in contempt of court. I mean, this is completely outrageous.
Absolutely. That's the first I've heard of that. Absolutely outrageous. Well, we've seen the attempts that Quadrilla have made to keep us away from the site. As you well know, in court on the 6th of March, when they were trying to extend the boundary of the area that was injuncted in 2014, it wasn't a huge expansion on it. And of course, there was that protest pen. But obviously they failed because you put your head over the parapet, and the judge threw the protest pen out and said we'll stick to the boundaries of the previous injunction. So that they'll try anything they can to stop protesters being anywhere near their activities. But I find it rather appalling that everywhere they seem to be drilling is an area of natural beauty. It's almost as if they're hell-bent on destroying such areas throughout the UK.
Well, and what is also interesting is that the primary targets are all in staunch Tory constituencies. The Fylde, Mark Menzies has a very significant majority. So even with everything that's going on right now and the level of awareness of Quadrilla's plans at Preston New Road and beyond, same in North Yorkshire, where Kevin Hollinrake was put in to be the party representative to push this agenda. And of course, in the heart of Surrey, this is staunch Toryland. So, the Tories, clearly believe that they can push this abomination in their traditional strongholds. I think they consider that it might be a little bit more difficult when they start to try and encroach into areas that are held by other parties. But, they can keep the party faithful in line and then pretend that, of course, they've got a democratic mandate to pursue this.
Yeah, obviously that might change on the 8th of June. And of course, we've also got up and coming the the publication of the report on the alleged Tory election fraud.
Well, that of course is why we have an election. That's
right.
Exactly why we have an election right now.
Yeah.
Because Theresa May was obviously well aware that if all the Tory MPs that were under investigation for fraud at the 2015 elections were suspended from Parliament, she would lose her majority. So by calling an election now, and she stated that all of those MPs will stand again. So if they are charged with fraud, it won't impact on them standing or remaining in Parliament because it relates to a previous election.
But if they're found guilty of election fraud, surely they will be made to stand down as an MP.
I'm not sure that's the case. It would be if it was the current election, but because this is a new election, I mean, if that was the risk, then I think the Tory party would have stood them down. And you may be right. I mean, maybe somebody takes the case on, but I think they are banking on the fact that obviously they're going to be whiter than white this time round. You know, they're going to make sure that there's no financial shenanigans. And so if the inquiry is pursued, it will relate to a previous Parliament. So yes, it is going to be an interesting one. But Bob, I mean, obviously, you know, Mark Menzies is in a absolutely rock solid position. And of course, the reality is that with multiple candidates standing against him, it splits the non-Tory vote. I mean, what is the possibility of common sense prevailing and everybody, with the exception of UKIP, because UKIP at least splits the Tory vote a bit, but with everybody else standing down and allowing the Labour candidate to have a free run at Menzies?
Well, from what I've heard today, there is a little bit of pressure being put via Facebook onto the Labour candidate to stand down and leave it to the Green Party candidate. But from my own experience, the Green Party candidate probably won't do terribly well in the Fylde. I've also heard today that there is possibly an independent running as well. I can't see the point. You know, I went through this in 2015. I got 1,380 votes for the Green Party. The next one was, I think, the Liberals with about 1,400 votes. Independent, 5,000 some. Labour, 8,600, something like that. So if the local candidates were to come to some form of progressive alliance agreement, which I know that Jeremy Corbyn has thrown that idea out and said that he won't be part of a progressive alliance. But if they did here in the Fylde, there is a chance that they will give Mark Menzies a run for his money. But with so many candidates running, there's no chance. And as happened in the last election, I wouldn't be surprised if he came out with an increased majority.
Well, you know, I'm actually looking at statistics on the net right now. Unfortunately, I can't put it up on the screen. But what we are looking at is Mark Menzies got 49.1% of the vote. Right, his nearest challenger, Jed Sullivan, got 18.8%, and so that's a margin of 31%. The biggest swing ever against the Tory candidate was 27%, and that was in 1997. So the likelihood of Menzies actually losing that majority is effectively slim to none. But like you say, if all of the other candidates, with the exception of the Labour candidate, stood down, because my understanding is that the Labour candidate cannot stand down because the Labour Party constitution requires the Labour Party to put up a candidate in every constituency. And so the likelihood of them being able to breach that is probably quite remote. But I mean, you know, where is the logic in asking the Labour Party candidate to stand down when, you know, he polled 8,000 votes in the last election, and UKIP got 5,500. The independent candidate got 5,000. Lib Dems, you know, 1,600. As you say yourself, you got 1,381. Good year, 1,381. That was Wat Tyler's rebellion. Coincidentally, yeah, another useless fact there. But anyway, maybe that's what we need again. Where's Wat Tyler when you need him? But yeah, it would make a lot of sense for everybody to put their weight behind Jed Sullivan and put a serious dent in Mark Menzies' majority. But unfortunately, I guess that egos will get in the way.
Quite possibly. I decided that I wasn't going to run. I have been asked if I would, but I decided not to. Partly because of the vote splitting situation, and partly because personally it was a bad experience, and I don't want to repeat it. I don't think I have the stamina for it. I personally am going to put my weight, such as it is, behind the Labour candidate, and I've offered to help him with his campaigning. Hopefully that might help him increase his majority, but with all the others splitting the vote, there's not very much chance of him getting in.
Yeah.
Which is absolutely ridiculous, because UKIP, if they hadn't gotten it, well, they're desperate to get MPs in, as are the Green Party and the Liberals, but they're not going to be able to make a difference. You know, one or two Green candidates here, one or two Liberal candidates here and there, they won't make any difference to the situation. And where we stand at the moment, it's absolutely crucial that we get rid of this government, because if they get in again and add another 2 years to Theresa May's term, then watch out, Britain. That's all I can say.
Well, you know, I have never, ever in my life encouraged people to vote Labour. But this time round, for this election, 2017, it's absolutely crucial that people actually think about what their vote is going to do. And you know, let me make the observation as well. There's a lot of people, of course, especially within the anti-fracking community, say, oh, I'm not voting, I'm not going to endorse the system. Well, the Tory party love that. The Tory party know fine well that those people who are not going to vote would not vote for the Tories come hell or high water. So by not voting, it means that there is the potential opposition that's out of the way. So the Tories don't care whether you don't vote, and they don't care if you do vote, as long as you don't vote for Labour. Because the reality is that Labour are the only realistic opposition. Now, I've got to say that if Ed Miliband had still been in the leadership role in the Labour Party, I would not have made that observation. And I'm well aware, of course, that Jeremy Corbyn is a Fabian. I'm well aware of all of the potential that we end up with a situation like occurred in the US, you know, where everyone says, oh, you know, we just don't want Hillary Clinton. It's like anybody but Hillary Clinton. And what they've ended up with is worse than Hillary Clinton. You know, but I doubt very much whether Jeremy Corbyn will be worse than Theresa May, because, you know, we know very well what we're going to get. If Theresa May gets into power, then she is certainly going to push this abomination of unconventional gas exploitation. She's going to push full steam ahead with the total destruction of the NHS. She's going to push full steam ahead with the privatisation. And, of course, the irony is that the police, who are, by their own admission, and we'll talk about this later, acting as corporate enforcement officers for Quadrilla in Lancashire, many of these will be privatised, quite possibly in this next term of office, if she gets in.
Yeah, well, they're all already limited companies. You know, the police forces are limited companies already, so it's exactly. just a question of a share transfer and takeover bid.
Yeah, and probably into G4S.
Yeah. They. Well, you said you're going to talk about the police later on, so I'll leave it to you.
Let's actually talk about the police now, because I want to bring up the discussion that took place with this gentleman. He doesn't look old enough to be a superintendent. It looks like he's just come off the graduate milk round. Here he is. This is your superintendent. Is he? I think he's the Silver Commander, isn't he, for the policing of the Preston New Road operation?
I think there are two Silver Commanders, because I have a meeting with upcoming meeting with one of the Silver Commanders. So I'm guessing that Robert Shaw. I wasn't able to take part or to be online when that Q&A was taking place, but I think that he is the Silver Commander of the OSUs, the Operational Support Units.
The thugs.
Yes, okay, you said it. The thugs.
They
yes.
are. They are Neanderthals.
Absolute thugs and automatons.
Yes.
They can't make a move without somebody
whispering in their ear.
Whispering in their ear and telling them exactly what to do. And I experienced this a few days ago. One of them had a hold of a protester on the roadside, and the vehicle that they were trying to stop people getting to had already gone into the site. The protester said, "So why are you detaining me? Why don't you let me go?" He said, I haven't been told to stand down yet. And he kept hold of the protester's jacket and kept looking towards his van, waiting for someone to tell him to stand down. His colleagues had already gotten into the van. And I've seen this kind of behavior from these people many, many times, without talking about the thuggery at the moment. I've seen this kind of behavior where they become confused. If you challenge them using their own tactics, mirroring their own behavior, they become confused because there's no one whispering in their ear and telling them what to do. They've been given instructions, I guess, to pile out of their vans and just bully people and throw them around. We've had a broken wrist. We've had a local councillor with torn ligaments in her knee. We've had a young man severely beaten within inches of myself where I was stood, but I couldn't get to it because of the force the police were using, and I sustained an injury myself that day. I was at Bolcombe, and I was shocked by the police behaviour there. I was also at Barton Moss, and even more shocked by the police behaviour there. But this knocks both of those into touch. I mean, I've never witnessed anything like it. It is completely disproportionate. There are far too many officers there. Apparently, it's costing £450,000 a month, plus another £2,000 a month.
200,000.
Another £200,000 a month in contingency costs. But that doesn't take into account all the court fees, all the cost of running the courts, the cost of the arrests, and the compensation claims that are going to be made against these officers. I mean, they've even targeted a disabled man in a wheelchair.
Now, I was actually at PNR on the morning where he was effectively kneed in the leg.
Yes, so was I.
Yeah, so I mean, it is outrageous. I mean, I myself have been manhandled more at Preston New Road. I mean, not that is in any way a deterrent. If they think it's a deterrent, they are completely wrong. In fact, quite the opposite, because I know that people watching the live streams and the videos from Preston New Road, I mean, whilst it may keep one or two people away, but others are totally incensed by the behaviour of the police, and the fact that Superintendent Richard Robert Shaw openly stated in his Q&A that he was primarily facilitating quadrilla.
Yes, he did. And the Bolton Evening News were on that live feed, on that Q&A, and they asked him a question. They asked him if he believed that the videos held by the protesters, the live stream videos taken by the protesters, were fake or real, and he didn't answer. So they rephrased it slightly, and they took out the "or real," and he didn't answer. And then they rephrased it again, and again he didn't answer. So I'm guessing he was in a bit of a cleft stick, really. You know, if he said, "No, I don't believe they're fake," then he's admitting that his officers are just a bunch of thugs and bullies. And if he said yes, he did believe they're fake, then again he's calling the protesters liars, and all of that video footage is out there in the public domain. You know, there's a lot of it, and some of it is quite graphic, particularly the event where that young man had his wrist broken.
Yes, in fact, he was right next to me. In fact, he got his wrist broken because he came over to film the officer who was literally shirt fronting me. And this was on a day of absolute gratuitous aggression. There was no need for it. It was just like a training exercise to see whether these guys would just do as they're told and, be unnecessarily aggressive. And the person concerned, came over to film and had his camera knocked from his hand. And as he bent down to catch it, the officer effectively knocked him to the ground and, managed to break his wrist. Yeah.
Well, complaints have been made. In fact, I was at Preston New Road on one occasion where the chap in the wheelchair was attacked again. And he tried to move his wheelchair out of the way. He was trying to get his wheelchair in motion to move out of the way. And one of the officers just pushed him in the chest. Now, either these people are on the lowest scale of education and they have precisely no brain, or it was deliberate, because they must have known that by pushing him in the chest as he was moving forward, his wheelchair would topple over backwards, which it did, and he smacked his head on the concrete or on the tarmac. They then unceremoniously picked him up, one officer on each arm and each leg, and literally threw him back to his wheelchair, but they misjudged it. And they actually placed him on top of one of the pillars that supports the backrest and damaged his buttocks. I was also there on the day that that officer kneed him in the thigh, and I witnessed that. It's just outrageous behaviour. And I have a meeting with one of the Silver Commanders to discuss just that. And the gentleman in the wheelchair will be with me. They're completely disproportionate. The cost of it is disproportionate. There's absolutely no need whatsoever for those officers to be there. And it's almost as if they're the thought police. So the incident that I referred to earlier on, the protester or one of the two protesters that they detained at that point, actually, were walking up the road away from the site. Okay, there was a wagon coming in. So I get it that they were a bit twitchy. The police were a bit twitchy. But there was no need for them to act in the way they have done. I mean, they've had young women that they've attacked, pulling their clothing up and baring their breasts. On one occasion, they had, I think it was a young woman on the ground, or they had a protester on the ground. Someone came over to film it, and an officer shoved him through a large lap fence, and the fence collapsed. You know, these panels that you get between concrete pillars, it just smashed the fence panel out of the way, and they seem to be getting worse now. When they pushed the wheelchair over, a complaint was made. I went to the local PLOs to make a complaint, and they said that a complaint has already been made and it's being dealt with. Since then, 2 360-degree cameras have appeared on the lampposts either side of the site. But I'm told that they're only on from 7 p.m. till 6 p.m. or something like that, and that they aren't recording. We're told that they were put there so that the Silver Commander that I'm meeting could look and see what's happening. So they've taken their activities further away, out of range of those cameras. So now, if there's been something going on up at the gate, quite often the protesters will be there for a convoy coming in, and then they'll go and take a break. And on one day last week, they were harassing those young protesters walking down the road. And local residents came out to challenge the police on what they were doing. There just seems no bounds to the way these people are acting.
Well, these officers have all been reframed. I mean, this is a, you know, it is a training program. They are reframed. They have the basic humanity removed from them. You know, and of course, I mean, I have no clue what derogatory term they have, but they will definitely have a derogatory term for the protection community. You know, just like the military come up with derogatory terms to make it easier for, you know, the military to not see their opponents as human, to dehumanize them. And this is exactly what's going on at Preston New Road. Yes, it is.
We have information that a short while ago they had a briefing for their officers, and they were told to identify the locals and the nationals, and then target the nationals. And now another word has come up. So we know we're just labels, but another word has come up now, and that is alphas. I was making an attempt to go after a vehicle that was coming out of the site. The police were fairly thin on the ground at that time, not sure why, so they were fairly well spread out. And I wasn't aware that there was a police officer following me. I was just watching what was going on ahead. And I heard behind me and turned around to see what it was. I heard a voice behind me, which was a sergeant telling one of his men to leave me alone and go for the alphas. And I'm guessing that the alphas are the guys that they know, what they call the national protesters, and some locals that they know are likely to jump on a vehicle or do a lock-on or something like that. And the people that I just referred to that were walking down the road when they were harassed, I think all but one of those were people from other parts of the country, what the police are calling nationals. They have police vehicles watching our camp. There has been an attempt to make an entry into the camp, sneaking around under cover of darkness. So we're obviously being very, very cautious. One of our problems here is boots on the ground. If the media's around, as they were on Monday and Tuesday, the thugs behave themselves to a degree. If there are a lot of protesters there, a lot of the local people, and effectively the police are outnumbered, they still get out of their vans and try to be bully boys, but of course they're outnumbered. So again, their violence is generally reduced. We need boots on the ground up here.
Yeah,
we're struggling. The numbers of people that are outside that gate it's difficult for the people in the camps to sustain the numbers up at the gate, because you know it's hard work. It's hard work running around up there all day, and they need to take a break now and again. And some of them will go away for a while, a couple of days, and then come back. But that reduces our numbers whilst that's happening. As you're aware, we've been doing pop-up protests, or some of them. I personally haven't done one yet. We've been doing pop-up protests. That also depletes the numbers. So we need a lot more people from the activist community to come up here and help us, because this site is crucial to what happens throughout the UK. I am confident that the reason we haven't got another drill in the ground yet is that they're waiting to see what happens in Lancashire.
Without any shadow of doubt, Bob, and you know, we're going to come back to some of this, but let's have a look here, because this is the north of England, and everything that is shaded there is targeted. So, you know, this is primarily the Bowland Shale, of course, which runs right across from the Lancashire coast, right down to south of Liverpool, down into Cheshire, and then right the way across to the North Yorkshire coast, right down into the East Midlands. And of course, there is 2 live sites right now. One is Preston New Road, and the other one is Kirby Misperton. But you're absolutely right, of course, because INEOS in particular are looking to target locations in Nottinghamshire and in Derbyshire. And, people can either sit around at home or, pontificate amongst themselves about how they're going to defend their community when the unconventional gas industry rolls into town, or they can be proactive, like some of the groups are starting to become, and go to Preston New Road on an exploratory mission, go and observe what goes on, and then go back and see how you can get involved. Because if the numbers are there, then there is the very strong possibility that Lancashire Police might actually feel it appropriate to adopt slightly different tactics. And Bob, you may not be aware, well, I think you are because I may have told you, but we had the first action at Kirby Misperton on Tuesday week ago. And this was when Third Energy were running their pressure test in association with the Environment Agency on KM8. Well, of course, KM8 is the well that they have permission to frack. So they were on the site. So the camp went down to blockade the site at Kirby Misperton. And we were there all day. And that locked the vehicles, the pressure testing vehicles in the site. But later on that afternoon, I mean, there were some contretemps. And I'm not going to show the video of this, but this is one of the cyclists, or it is the cyclist that was knocked off of his bike by a Third Energy driver. And in fact, the last thing I did before I left North Yorkshire to come back down to the southwest was go to Pickering police station and give a statement, because I caught this on video. So we have the prima facie evidence of a Third Energy driver deliberately turning his vehicle into the cyclist to take him off his bike. But when North Yorkshire Police eventually came down, and this is Inspector McEwen, and I'm going to play a video of Inspector McEwen. But before I do that, John Dewar, who is the operations director of Third Energy, actually came down to the site. And it's a very short video clip of John Dewar driving his vintage Volvo.
Coming from your side.
No. All I want to do is gas people.
Hello, Eddie.
John, you told us you weren't going to frack. Do you remember?
I've never told you that.
Yes, you did. Oh, yes, you did. You told Anne McIntosh you weren't going to frack. And we don't believe a word you say. No, jog on.
Pie merchant.
Jog on, brother.
Straight in the land, the water, dirty.
You haven't a clue what you're saying.
Man responsible.
You have not
That's the man responsible there for putting in the water to get a good picture. That'll be the man responsible.
I'm sorry you feel that way. I really am.
Shame on you! Shame on you!
Shame on you! Shame on you!
Okay, well, for those who aren't aware, that was John Dewar, the operations director of Third Energy. Bob, it was that absurd. All he could say was, "You have no idea what you're talking about." Well, as it happens, I actually have a copy of the letter that was passed to me. I have the copy of a letter from Anne McIntosh, the previous MP for North Yorkshire. She was ousted by the Tory party because she was vehemently anti-fracking. And in this letter, Anne McIntosh states categorically that John Dewar assured her that they wouldn't frack because Third Energy neither had the equipment nor the expertise. Now, of course, he denies that. But anyway, he didn't come back. He didn't come back to the well site. And basically, the police didn't arrive until quite some time later. In fact, I think it was probably around about 8 o'clock. And the behaviour of the police, and there was no media here. Let me make that point. There was no media here. So there was no third-party oversight on the way in which North Yorkshire police were conducting themselves. But whilst we don't have the time to show the full interaction, I want to show this short clip of how discussions started between Inspector McEwen and the gathered protectors. It's going to take about 30 minutes or so to walk up to the... I think we have the wrong video there, actually, unfortunately. That's a shame. I think it's my fault for loading the wrong video. But Inspector McEwen was the epitome of measured cordiality and professionalism. And the discussions, took something in the region of about an hour or so. And eventually all parties were agreed. In fact, Third Energy were the reluctant party. But the agreement was that the gathered body of protectors could escort the Third Energy vehicles up the road right through Kirby Misperton village. So that's about 3/4 of a mile. And I think it took about 40 odd minutes or so to walk that 3/4 of a mile. And I think I have in the next video basically the start and the finish of that walk. So let's just take a look at that. It's going to take about 30 minutes or so to walk up to the village. And it's interesting that the police themselves have actually blocked the southern side of the road here to ensure that they have to actually turn left and come up towards Kirby Misperton village. So really sorry for the bright light, but we did an update at sunset.
And it's totally dark.
And so an interesting turn of events here.
Yeah, well, we've had some okay conversations with North Yorkshire Police. There was a bit of bargaining here and there, and it looks like we're going to be able to do a walk to the village of Kirby Misperton, which is quite symbolic as well, isn't it? That we're going to escort the company that's going to destroy the village to the village, and hopefully there'll be some locals looking out and will cause a bit of a stir there.
So you're happy with the way the day's gone?
Absolutely, and for such a unplanned and disorganised rabble, look how many people we've managed to mobilise so quickly. I think this bodes well.
Sue?
Disorganised? Yeah. Powerful? Absolutely. And we're going to win this. We're not going to let them do this fracking nonsense. They're not going to destroy this countryside or the people's livelihoods or the agriculture.
Well, they are going to have to come on this side of the road, aren't they? So if you want to organise yourself so that they can come round this way, that would be brilliant.
Oh yeah. Okay, that's the fixed wheelbase. It couldn't get round.
Could I trouble you to come out the middle of the roundabout, please? It's really, really, really. Again, if I could trouble you just to...
Have you laid on the bus for us to go back?
I'm afraid we haven't.
Well,
I'm an old lady. Can I have a lift, please?
I do recall the inspector discussing it with you, saying sort your own logistics out.
I did. I did. You're absolutely right. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, gentlemen and ladies. Well done. So for a first encounter with North Yorkshire Police, I think everybody was, very happy that an agreement was reached and that there was a facilitated slow walk. Now, I have to say, it was made very clear in the course of the discussions, it was made very clear that this was not a precedent. It was a cold, wet, miserable day. We'd been there for some 12 hours nearly. And, I think everyone was pretty much ready to get some hot food inside them. But nonetheless, a lot of the local community came down to support, and full credit to Inspector McEwen for negotiating the release of Third Energy's employees and then facilitating the walk up to Kirby Misperton village. But no precedent. Every day will be different. But the other thing that was actually made very clear, and unfortunately we've seen this elsewhere, particularly in Lancashire, where the police have offered an arrangement or an agreement and then welched on it. And I did make the observation in the course of the discussion that whilst it was not a reflection on either Inspector McEwen or North Yorkshire Police, but if there was any change in the process from the initial agreement, then it would be the last discussion that ever took place. And I think that was understood. Now, Bob, wouldn't it be amazing if that could be replicated in Lancashire?
Yeah, it'd be fantastic. Unfortunately, we've got the thought police over here, and you can't even walk up the road without being hassled. Or you showed a picture earlier on of one of Third Energy's where one of Third Energy's vehicles had knocked somebody off the bicycle. We're having incidents here where the lorries that are coming in are swerving towards protesters who are stood in the cycle lane, possibly gesticulating at them, but nonetheless they're swerving towards them. And we've actually had an incident where the police have done exactly the same. And how the hell they missed the police, how the hell they missed that protester they swerved at is completely beyond me. Worlds apart. I haven't been over to Kirby Misperton, so I'm taking it that the roads there are considerably narrower than Preston New Road, which again is another part of our problem. It's a clear way. It's on the gateway is deliberately on a very dangerous stretch of that clearway, and we just have to sniff, and they're on us.
Yeah, but that's why. Of course, it's so crucial to bring about the creativity. And I have to say that this I picked up from the Mail Online. Now, it has to be said that the Mail Online is a completely different editorial team from the printed version of the paper. And the Mail Online is reportedly the most widely read online newspaper on the planet. And it also has to be said that the Mail Online has, over the course of the last few years, published a number of articles which actually are quite sympathetic towards the anti-fracking community and the campaign. And so here was the headline: anti-fracking campaigners cause chaos for commuters by blocking entry road to new gas exploration site. But the article does go on to explain, or at least report, from the protectors that they had not intended to block the road, but that they had intended to block the gate, but Quadrilla's security personnel would not allow them to lay across the gate. And even when they told the police that they were willing to move just to block the gate, the police didn't actually take them up on it. So this was an action from Tuesday, but this was one of the photographs that was published in that Mail Online article. All I can say is thank you very much for publishing these photographs, because hopefully they will stimulate some curiosity amongst some of the readers, because, you know, there's the classic statement, fracking toxins cause cancer and birth defects, as is supported by academic papers. And although it will be denied, of course, by the industry, the papers are there for those who have the intellectual curiosity to go seek. And that was on Tuesday. And in fact, I think it was also on Tuesday that there was a lock-on at AE8's gate. Is that right, Bob, or was that Wednesday?
No, it was also Tuesday.
It was Tuesday,
no, sorry, that was yesterday. It was Wednesday.
So this was the same day as Greenpeace showed up with their blocks. Now, I've looked at the photographs. I wasn't there myself. I've looked at the photographs and I've spoken to a couple of people who were there. And Greenpeace must be very, very disappointed that the action wasn't as effective as it might have been, because it looks like they had a 10-man lock-on, 2 in each of these blocks, and here's another view of that. But it seems that I gather that both the Quadrilla Security and the PLOs simply watched the Greenpeace blockade get put in place. Now, whether those locking on maybe felt a bit rushed or whatever, but as you can see from this picture, they were only effectively blocking half the entrance.
Yeah, that's right. And a convoy had gone into the site just before they arrived, and that convoy was able to get out of the site purely because they were turning left. They didn't actually get any further convoys in until they had been released from those boxes. But again, the site was shut down for almost a full day. So it was effective, but not quite as effective as it could have been, because they managed to get vehicles in and out.
But it held up a lot of police there. I mean, look at the number of police vans here. I mean, there were 7. 7 with a 6 in this picture alone. And of course, all of the drone occupants. But I mean, each time I've been at Preston Road, there has been at least 70 visible police. And we know there's quite a few more being held in locations in reserve. So it's not really any wonder that it's reportedly costing £450,000 a month plus $200,000 in other costs. Now, Bob, of the actions, and most of the actions at Preston New Road have obviously been the result of people who are either living or staying in the area, actually using their creativity. And then obviously some of the other pop-ups have been people from Greater Manchester, from Bolton, from Bury, and obviously people from Yorkshire, from Liverpool, and from Cheshire, and from Lincolnshire have also participated in the lock-ons. But I want to reiterate what you were saying earlier. It is so important that groups from elsewhere in the country lend their support to Preston New Road. In fact, last night I was giving a presentation in South Devon, and one of the outcomes of that meeting was that a group of people from that group in South Devon are going to go up to Preston New Road, and they're going to stay there for a few days, initially to just observe and get the lie of the land, as it were, but then with a view to perhaps potentially getting somewhat more involved. And, you know, as you have rightly said, unfortunately, Lancashire alone doesn't have the resources to be able to do what is going to be necessary to prevent Quadrilla from getting their bits in the ground. And I mean, you know, I think we all understand now that if this industry gets a foothold in this country, then the legacy that we will be leaving future generations really doesn't bear thinking about. Bob?
Yeah. Well, I can only reiterate what you've just said. We do need people. We will look very much looking forward to the people that you've mentioned from Devon coming up, particularly for me, because that's where I grew up. So it'd be nice to talk to some people from down there. Yeah, we need bodies on the ground. We need boots on the ground. There is ample space for people to camp. We've got quite a big campsite, and it's reasonably well equipped at the moment, although we're hoping to improve on that situation. There's plenty of space. We've got the toilets, we've got water, which is quite unusual. You know, we've got water piped in, which is quite unusual, and that's helping us to put things in place like showers, toilets,
and a beautiful wood burning cooker.
Yes.
And so, yes, there are some real quality food being produced at the camp. Well, Bob, you know, we're coming to the end of the show, so thank you so much for joining me this evening and sharing your insights and thoughts into, you know, what's going on at Preston New Road. But it would be remiss of us not to also mention that, you know, this is an industry that really should not even be getting off the ground, because the oil price, I mean, look at this, is actually yesterday afternoon, is at $47.49. And of course, the reality is that this is a long way short of the $75 a barrel that would be necessary, or $75 a barrel equivalent when we're talking about gas, that would be necessary to make this a viable proposition in the UK. And, you know, OPEC has now found the right level. It's around about $50 a barrel. That's where the price of oil is going to stay. It's not going to go much above $50 a barrel for the foreseeable future. And by that, I mean the next sort of 4 or 5 years or so. And the impact on companies like iGas, I mean, this is iGas. Bear in mind, this is iGas. The stock price when we were at Barton Moss was £1.60. At the end of February, it was 8.5 pence. And as of yesterday, it was under 5 pence. I mean, this is basically junk stock. They're desperate for somebody like Jim Ratcliffe of Ineos to come buy them out. And of course, Jim Ratcliffe and Ineos are really, you know, the big concern, because Ineos is a private company, and they don't have any shareholders to answer to, and you know, they have licenses right across the country. If we look at this graphic here, you know, we look at all the companies that are in North Yorkshire, targeting North Yorkshire, and Kirby Misperton, Third Energy, is right slap bang in the middle there. But look at all the companies around them. Ineos have taken over Moorland Exploration, which has the license that effectively covers the North York Moors, and Ineos all around the area there, and Quadrilla to the south and to the north and along the coast here. And iGas, the company we just talked about with the stock price, you can see why they are hoping that Ineos will actually stump up and pick up their debt, because they hold the adjoining licenses in a number of different areas of the country, in Cheshire and also in the East Midlands. So, Bob, it's still early days. You know, Quadrilla haven't finished the pad. They haven't got the rig to site. And I absolutely know that when the rig goes up on Preston New Road, and of course in the first instance it's going to be a relatively short, I think about 12 metre tall workover rig, before the 50-odd metre rig goes up. Is it 53 metres or 35 metres? My dyslexia is...
Their planning permission was for a 35-metre rig, but they pulled a bit of a stroke recently with regard to a redundant site at Beaconsall, and they've had the rig height changed from 35 meters to 50 meters. Now, why they would want a 50-meter rig to plug the well, I don't know. But
no, to drill the well, to drill the well.
Well, this is a well that's already drilled. They're
pre-salt, right? Sorry, yes, pre-salt, yes.
No, it's actually Beaconsall, the other on south of the Ribble, and they recently got their planning permission changed to allow them to use a much larger rig, and that site is just for restoration, according to what they requested in their planning permission. But we know how this industry operates. Salami slicing doesn't even cut it, does it?
No. Well, the fact is that once that rig goes up, then everybody driving down that road will start to realise the magnitude of the impact this industry is going to have right across the field. And I still have the graphic that I was using on the Fractured Future tour. And I think this graphic was originally produced by Paul Mobbs, but showing the intended or the prospective intended pads that Quadrilla would want to establish around the field if this industry actually gets a foothold. And the only areas that are exempt are, of course, the urban areas running along the coast. They're, really down from Fleetwood right down to Lytham and St Anne's, whereas the whole of the rest of the Fylde Peninsula will be targeted with well sites. So, all to play for. This is episode 107. It's 3.5 years since I first started putting out episodes of Fracking Nightmare. It's now 4.5 years since the moratorium. Sorry, is it 4? It's 4.5 years, yes, since the moratorium was lifted in December of 2012, and we still not had a frack in this country. And despite the fact that Quadrilla are in the process of building their pad at Preston New Road, and despite the fact that Third Energy have permission to frack an existing well at Kirby Misperton, there is still time to prevent this industry establishing a foothold. And the biggest opportunity is to try to oust this toxic Tory government. And for the first time in my life, I'm going to encourage people, vote with your head, vote Labour, because it's only by voting Labour there's any possibility of getting the Tories out of office. And by 2022, hopefully, we'll be in a whole new ballgame. Thanks for joining us this evening. My thanks to my guest, Bob Dennett. Bob, look forward to hooking up with you soon, when I'm back in Lancashire. And I'll see you next week from the studio here in Plymouth.